Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the best settings to be using in Apex Legends Season 4. Now some of these settings are personal preference, so I'm going to show you guys how to find your perfect settings that are suited to you, doing a few in-game tests. Now if you guys do go ahead and enjoy today's video, be sure to scroll down, drop a like to support the video further, and be sure you're subscribing if you're currently not subscribed to the channel. Now we're going to start off with the gameplay section because that's probably the least important part throughout this whole video. I recommend you guys pause this video, go over to your game and have your game settings open whilst watching this video. So when it comes to the gameplay section, there's not much that actually needs to be changed, but a few key things are the crosshair damage feedback. I made a video a few weeks ago on just this one setting and explained why it's better to have it turned off and why pro players such as Asu have this setting turned off. The first reason is that you don't have a big X appearing in front of the enemy. You can see the enemy much clearer when you're engaging in gunfights, and the damage indicator will still appear with the shield color on the outline, so you can still see what shield the enemy has when you're dealing damage into them, and the sound of impact is still there. The sound of you landing a shot into the enemy or dealing damage into the enemy is always still going to be present, so when you're dealing thermite damage, any sort of damage into the enemy, it's still going to tick and make that sound. I've noticed ever since I've turned this setting off, I'm focusing more on where I'm landing my shots into the enemy as I have a much clearer view. So when it comes to the damage numbers, this is a very clear one, and I think this is one that everybody should be changing. You should have it set to both. The reason why you want it set to both is because both means that the whole damage you do into the enemy is going to stack into one number, and it's not going to show individual numbers for each bullet damage you've dealt. It's going to stack it all up for you and give you an equal number. We're not all maths geniuses, we don't know how much damage we've dealt into the enemy overall, but this does it all for us, and they're going to be floating, so it's going to be staying there for a little while as well, so you have a very clear indication of how much damage you've dealt into the enemy and whether or not you should go for the push. Now the last setting in the gameplay section is a setting that I think has only been added recently. It's not something we had in last season, and it's taking damage closes death box menu. You want to have this turned off because a lot of the time when you're trying to shield swap with other enemies that have died, then if you're being dealt damage, it's going to immediately take you out of that menu and you won't be able to get off the shield swap. So having this thing turned off ensures that even if you're being dealt damage, you can still go into their inventory and shield swap successfully. I've previously done the mistake in keeping this setting turned on, and every time I've gone into an enemy's death box and I've just tried to shield swap, an enemy's shot at me, and because I didn't get the shield swap off, I've been dealt with so much damage and I've gone down. So moving on to controller layout, this is the most important section throughout the whole video, so be sure you guys are listening up. And the first thing we're going to speak about is button layout. Now button layout is a very important part. I have mine on customized, and the things I've customized within my button layout are I've changed the crouch and melee. The reason why I've changed that is because I want to maintain control of my aim at the same time of crouching. Now if you're using circle to crouch, this is very hard because you have to move your thumb over to the circle button or to, I don't know what Xbox is, and you lose control of your aim. So you can't crouch strafe during a gunfight, and you also can't slide past corners whilst maintaining your aim. So that's the first thing I've changed within my controller layout. The second thing is that I make it L1 and R1, which are the top back buttons, to aim down sights and shoot. The reason why I've done that is because these top two buttons are click style buttons. They're not push down buttons. So the input is going to be at its lowest compared to the triggers, which means you can get off your aiming and your shooting faster than if you're using the triggers. That's why I've flipped the two layouts. Now if you would like to customize your layout even further, I recommend changing the jump button to your tactical ability, flipping the two, which means you can jump whilst maintaining control of your movement at the same time. I don't use that because I'm very happy with what I've got at the moment, but if you want to go even more technical, you can change your jump with your tactical to give you even more of an advantage in game. Just bear in mind that when you're changing your button layout, it's going to take a lot of time to adjust to it, so the first few games you might do very badly because it takes time to adjust to things, so just be very patient. I have my crouch set to toggle. This is more of a personal preference. I'm used to having it on toggle because when I'm sliding, I don't have to hold down the crouch button. If you have it on hold, it means you have to hold down the crouch button to maintain in that position, and this is good for things like bunny hopping. If you want to bunny hop, then you have have to put it on hold. You can't bunny hop having the set on toggle, so I don't really bunny hop in the game, that's why I have it on toggle. But if your intentions are to bunny hop, you need to have it on hold. Now moving on to the next part, the L2 and the R2 dead zones, I have that set to none. The reason why I have it set to none is because it's the fastest response you can get from them buttons. The lower you have the dead zone set means the less you have to press down on the triggers for them to be activated. So having them set on none means that you only have to press the triggers down ever so slightly for them to actually become activated and do the mechanic in game. Now sensitivity, the most important part throughout your settings and probably the most crucial one as well. Sensitivity has been amongst us in loads of other games in the past, and there's always been that one question, is there a best sensitivity? And the answer to that is no. Professional players use a wide range of sensitivities, from very small sensitivities such as 2 and 3 to very high ones such as 5 and 6. Now my standard sensitivity is a 5 and my aiming sensitivity is a 4. I've recently bumped them up from a 4-3, and I'm enjoying using a much faster sensitivity, especially when it comes to turning around corners, but I don't want to sacrifice my aim, and that's the most important thing. You want to increase it to a point where it doesn't sacrifice your aim. Now one way to practice your sensitivity and see if it's the best for you is going to training and practice what's called your snapping. Now snapping is essentially successfully landing the first shot into the enemy without having to readjust your aim. So if you're aiming directly at the enemy and not having to readjust your aim, so you haven't aimed past the enemy or just slightly before to the point where you have to readjust your aim yet again, then your sensitivity is quite good. But just bear in mind that you're not going to snap every single shot, you're going to miss a few shots here and there, but if you go into training and practice this drill I'm doing in the background, then it can give you a good understanding on whether or not you're over aiming, under aiming to the point where you need to change it. All of my optic sensitivities are on 4, which is high. Even if you have it on a 3 sensitivity, it's not going to be the same as a standard 3 aiming in sensitivity on like a flat line, because you're going to have a much smaller field of view and you're aiming down a scope. So if you can bump your sensitivity higher on scopes, then it will give you a much quicker time to snap onto targets, especially from the medium to closer ranges. But as I said earlier, accuracy is king, and the moment you feel like your accuracy is suffering because of a high sensitivity, then you want to start prioritizing your accuracy and lowering your sensitivity. But my advice is see how high you can go before you notice a difference in your accuracy. Now the next thing we're moving on to is your response curve, another major thing and a major setting within your settings that could have a big impact on your aim. I have mine on classic because I like the classic feel, but if you have it on steady, steady's meant to be a very good setting. The way I can explain it to the best potential is that it reduces the sensitivities in the short spouts of your aim, and it can be quite accurate. However, I find classic merged with look Deadzone on none is the best way you can go. If you have it on fine aim has 2 sensitivities built into it. If you're using fine aim, the moment you move your right stick towards the outer circle, it's going to jump your sensitivity completely and it's going to be very high. However, if you're only moving your stick gradually within the inner circle, then the sensitivity isn't going to be high, but it's the moment you move your stick towards the edge of the perimeter, that's when the sensitivity just bumps by about 300%, and it can be good in certain situations. If there's 2 enemies nearby and you finish one of them off, you don't have to aim out and then readjust your aim to then aim back in. You can use that ultra sensitivity to quickly lock onto the other enemy, but honestly I prefer the classic feel, as sometimes this can screw you over. Now high velocity is almost the opposite of fine aim. It actually makes the inner circle very sensitive, and that is a very big problem because the inner circle is what you'll be using when you're trying to control your recoil and trying to aim when you're engaging with enemies, and having that inner circle ultra sensitive means you won't land hardly any shots onto the enemy. And I'm sure some of you guys have used this just for a joke when playing Apex Legends, and as you can see in the background, I am not pretending that this is a bad setting. This is generally how I'm playing, having this setting on. I'm trying my best to aim at the enemy, and as you can see, I'm not having any success. I would definitely not recommend using this setting because it's a very bad setting. Now the last option, which is linear, is raw input from your stick going through to the monitor, and a lot of people I know actually use this, but the problem with this is that it takes time to get used to, and if you start using it straight away, it's almost going to feel like the high velocity option previously, because you're not used to moving your stick that fast. And the raw input is a good option if you can adjust fast, but if not, I recommend just sticking to classic, as these last two options are very ultra sensitive options. Now moving on to the look Deadzone option, I made a video on this exact setting a few weeks ago. I have mine set to none. Look Deadzone is essentially how far out you have to move your right stick for it to then create an input. Now having it set to none means that even if you move your right stick such a small fraction, it's still going to put that input into the monitor. So when you're trying to readjust your recoil in them very small increments, it's going to pick that up and it's going to help you when you're engaging in gunfights against enemies. However, if you don't have it on none and you have it on a higher option, when you're doing them small adjustments on your right stick, the game won't be picking that up and it's going to be very inaccurate and could potentially throw your aim off. So having this set to none is the most accurate you could have it set to. So be sure you're changing your look Deadzone if you haven't already. Now when it comes to the advanced look controls, I have this turned off. I don't mess around with these settings at all, and I recommend you guys don't either. As always, you could go in there and mess around with a few things, but I've done that in the past and it threw my settings off completely, and I've learnt my lesson this time to not mess around with these settings, as it really doesn't do any favours, and a lot of the options within the advanced look controls, if anything, can make your gameplay feel worse. Now moving on to the video option, probably one of the least important things, but there is one part I want to speak about, and that is your field of view. If you can, you want to max out your field of view to 110. This means that you have more view around you towards the side of your screens, so you can spot enemies easier, and when you're engaging in them close range engagements, you have more control of what's going on around you. So having your field of view at the max it could possibly be will give you the best advantage possible. I'm sure most of you guys have already maxed out your field of view, but there might be some beginners that are unaware of this setting. I have my sprint view shake set to minimum, as I don't like my screen shaking when I'm running, but this is obviously a personal preference thing. The thing is that having it on minimum, if anything, can just improve the smoothness of your gameplay, so I recommend having it on minimum. It does help me out a lot. Now a weird setting that I've always had turned off is my audio music volume in game. I have this set turned off because in previous seasons, when you were to drop at the beginning of a game, the music would be going off in the background, and that could potentially interrupt me when I'm trying to hear enemies around me, especially when you're dropping in very popular areas where you know enemies are going to be present. Having that music in the background can be very off-putting, and it could be the reason why you don't hear an enemy come up from behind. I'm not sure if this has been fixed. I haven't actually tried turning on the music since season 2. I've always had it turned off, and it just makes me hear enemies easier towards the start and also throughout the stages of the game where the music is also present. So those are the settings wrapped up. I hope you guys have learned from this video and you've changed some of these settings to help improve your gameplay experience and also improve your level. So if you guys did enjoy today's video and you learned something new, I'd really appreciate a like. A like always supports my videos, and if you're currently not subscribed to the channel, be sure you're subscribing so you don't miss out on any videos like this one you've seen today. Be sure you're clicking the notification bell so you know when my videos have gone live. Thank you all for watching this Apex Legends video. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch all of you guys out in another brand new Apex Legends video.